Hello everybody! In my video where I was talking about new UIs for animation rigs, I intentionally focused on aspects other than the face. Ivan made the choice not to reveal his face to the world as he felt self-conscious about feeling unfinished, and I respected his wishes. Now that I've had some time to work on it, he's feeling better about the topic and willing to show himself off. After we explore the backstory of how I got here, we'll take a look. Previously, I was employed at a VFX facility contributing to the production of an upcoming movie called Creation of the Gods. During this time, I implemented a dynamic facial setup for one of the characters utilizing the plugin Ziva. The integration of this setup into the pipeline was a last-minute addition necessitating integration with pre-existing work. In that facial character effects simulation setup, the approach involved generating a control mesh from the animator's performance that followed the underlying bone structure. This mesh then drove dynamic tissue recreating the skin layer. To enhance the realism even further, we implemented a dynamic fine wrinkle pass, adding intricate details on top of the base performance. To explore this further, I decided to rethink the whole setup for a short film project that I was working on with a focus on hitting a couple of points of change. First, the animator needed a better preview of what character effects would output. Due to the natural shear and volume conservation of the tissue, pulling on it from the inside wouldn't distort it as much as the animator intended, muting some of the deformation of the face. Second, there was always a trade-off on how dynamic the tissue was versus how well it followed the animator's face shapes. When it was fully attached to the underlying mesh, it muted some of the potential for dynamics beyond the range of shearing. Third, because it was driven by blend shapes, it still inherently moves from one shape to the next linearly. This implementation addresses all of these points and keeps what was great about the original setup. Next, let's talk about the Anim Rig's facial setup for this pipeline. Let's say hello to Ivan once again. Some of these facial controls are similar to a standard snapper's rig, while others, like the lips, are distinctly designed to illustrate the muscle's pull direction in the simulation. Controls like the lip corner or the inner brow are riveted to a uniform internal skin skull depth mesh where moving the control pushes the rivets constraints U and V values. This pipeline changes the nature of the animation rig's facial component into a preview of geo that's generated in the simulation. No face shapes were modeled to create this face rig. If some combination of shapes didn't accurately describe the simulation's output, then generating that combo just needs to be resimulated. While it does put some limitations on what kind of techniques you use in the facial rig, the freeing thing is that you aren't creating the final shape. Elements like lip interaction will recompute before the end. While the preview will never be perfect, it's reliable and easy to work with. Here's a bit of animation I did, which is playing back off the animation rig with no simulation. One of the shapes you won't see included here is a lip seal shape that releases from one side of the mouth to the other. I didn't include it in the animation rig, but you'll see it in the final. Let's look at some results. As you can see, there's no linearity like typical facial animation. Lips collide and tissues retain volume. Everything deforms naturally, spreading, stretching, and compacting across the skin. Wrinkles work as they should. Skin sags under the brows and stretches around. I have more fine line wrinkles planned for the final look, but they're gonna need to get baked to animated vector displacements and need greater subdivisions. To set up the simulation step, the face was broken into individual tissues that define major volumes or changes of direction in the face. For example, tissues like the upper lip need to be separated from the lower lip to keep them dynamically separate. When simulating the tissue, animated attachments emulate the muscles of the face pulling tissue around bone. Here you can see a small-scale example of this attachment in action. As it pulls, the tissue has the dynamic freedom to collide with other tissues or bone and still reacts to forces like gravity or momentum while still hitting an intended expression. Here you can see some face geo with bone beneath where you can see overlaid some firing attachments. To further illustrate the advantages of this over a typical face setup, I have some alt versions reusing the exact same animation curves and rig. Look at how the tissue that's slapping him across the face reverberates through his cheek and lips. In this one, we can see his heavy nose ring weighing down the nose and the top lip, and his top lip interacting with his lip ring. As this one shows, the tissue stays fully dynamic and is not attached to something from behind. The muscle pulls at the tissue from wherever it is in space, allowing you to keep the expressions under extreme circumstances. If you'd like to get a little more information on how this works, I'm making this small example file available to download for those of you with a Maya Ziva license. You'll get to see a peek of how I'm driving attachments to pull a dynamic tissue. You'll find the link in the description. I hope this gives you some new ideas. I think it'll be a really standout feature in the short Ivan will be used in. And can't wait to show you some rendered frames.